Hi there, and welcome to Get NIST-y, the podcast that breaks compliance out of the checkbox trap and turns it into a real security advantage. No fluff, no FUD, just practical strategies to make compliance work for your MSP. I'm Jared Kasner, and I'm joined by my co-founder of Blacksmith InfoSec and co-host of Get NIST-y, Michael Zabarski. Today, in a special live recording, we're joined by Nicholas Fry, the co-founder of TurboDocx, and Ahmad Al-Hadiq, CTO at Everykey. Nicholas, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Nicholas Fry. I'm the founder of TurboDocx. I try to make it easy so you could send out proposals to your customers and use data from things like Zoom or HubSpot or other sources of data, your CPQ, whatever, and get that out in seconds of AI. So that's what we do.
Awesome. Thank you. Ahmad, would you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here and chatting about AI and all. Everykey, we hate MFA, we hate all the work that is required for employees to authenticate themselves. So we've created a passwordless authorization solution that's proximity-based, that allows IT managers to easily deploy secure identity management solutions using a person's proximity to their device.
That sounds cool. And we're going to get into that in a little bit here, especially as it pertains to AI. Today, we're turning up the heat. Is AI the future of security or a threat in disguise? We'll explore where AI actually helps, where it might backfire, and how MSPs can navigate the hype without losing their shirts. Let's start with, where is AI in your stack today? And Ahmad, as the CTO, I want to maybe jump into your stack. How are you and Everykey using AI on a daily basis?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure, for the past couple of years that we're not using, we're doing AI washing, just plugging in AI here and there just for the sake of it. We wanted to use AI to truly solve the authentication problem. So we've explored multiple areas, and what we've realized, there are two ways that we could do this. Number one is currently we're solving the authentication, the MFA, the OTP problem to get you into your device, into your SSO, into your enterprise applications by turning it into a passwordless, proximity-based solution. But I think the next step after that is where AI can really kick in and solve that problem, where you're able to authorize the person logging into that machine instead of making sure it's the person using OTP or passwords, etc. And instead of requiring that person to enter their information every time to authenticate, we know it's them, and we only ask them to authenticate if we feel like it's not them. And you could do this in multiple different ways. So that's one area that we're building AI to kind of tackle this problem. We're also using contextual behavior and analysis to understand your habits as you're using secure applications to kind of add an additional level of authentication. That's all part of that segment. Number two is we're partnering with companies that, for example, deliver computer vision. And take the case of a call center, and you've got hundreds of people sat there. You've got these cameras. They've got AI solutions to monitor their employees. We've built in a solution that integrates into that to know that Jared just left his workstation. Hey, let's lock it down. Or if he sat on his workstation, there are people around him, we can detect that there's something going on. Let's lock that machine. So we're using AI in those fronts to make authentication better. And those are where it is currently, or it's currently in the works. But we're always looking at how can we use AI to make things easier. Another last thing that I want to mention, given that we manage credentials, we also used AI to better understand a web page. Is this a login screen, a registration screen? We've got our algorithms that do this, but they are, they're not 100%. So we've used AI, for example, to detect whether this is what type of page, and how can we make it easier to complete the login or authentication process. So we already used it in these different little areas, but what I mentioned initially are like the big projects for us moving forward, and we see AI can be really truly helpful.
Cool. Mike, maybe following on from that, I know you've seen AI in a bunch of different places in the security stack, everything from detection to agentic auto remediation. What are some things that you're seeing and some trends that you're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the spicy take on this. It depends
Bring it.
whether the technical team or the marketing team. If you ask the marketing team, AI is everywhere and all throughout every single product. I think the good vendors are using it strategically and not just slapping it in there. There's a lot of companies out there that are just slapping AI wherever they can into their product. It's interesting because there's a lot of good that AI can do, but it always requires some sort of human intervention, just a checkpoint to say, yes, it didn't hallucinate, it is sane. And so I think, using it in tools intelligently and carefully with human intervention is a great thing. And letting it run rampant will put us in the world of Terminator very shortly. So somewhere in between is the correct answer, probably. But yeah, no, there's a lot of tools where they're using it for, again, threat detection. They're using it for, as Ahmed said, kind of figuring out who the users are and whether they let them in, assistance, even within the security stack for people to interact with it. Within GRC platforms, people are using it for helping them map controls or figure out, hey, how do we validate evidence? So there's lots of different uses for it. I think the real question is, how do we keep it used? How do we use it in a secure way that it's not going to start hallucinating, coming up with false positives? In Ahmed's case, how do we keep it from, randomly deciding, no, this isn't secure, this person isn't secure, and just locking them out and revoking all the keys, etc. So.
Another area where I've seen it pretty commonly in the GRC space is automatically generating documents like security policies and things like that. And Nicholas, I know you've got some experience with auto-generating documents, so maybe you can share your experience and expertise here with us.
Yeah, so my take on AI with security is a little bit different because in my mind, the value of all these new AI platforms is aggregating data from multiple sources. And I'm not just saying that as like a shameless plug to our platform, but just, when you think about it, the data is only good as where you get it, right? And what I'm seeing, and just getting a little bit technical for a second, a lot of people tend to overcomplicate or over mystify how AI security should work. There's a standard that's been used for a very long time. We all on this call know it. It's called OAuth. And more often than not, what people are doing is they're leveraging existing protocols that a human would use that assign you a token that say, hey, here's what Nicholas can and can't do. So yes, Nicholas could look at Zoom transcripts. Nicholas could look at these records in HubSpot, but he can't look at this other thing potentially. So when you have an AI agent in there, you're just giving it the same type of token a human would use. Now, to your point about the hallucinations, like, yeah, I could see that being a problem, but, jokes aside, like, anything that's worthwhile sending to a customer, let's say you're closing a 10K or 100K deal. Are you really going to just let AI do it, not check it over? I mean, even if I did it as a human, I'm going to send it to 3 of my team members and say, hey, like, look at this, make sure there's nothing we're missing, make sure we're catching every edge and corner. So going back to, let's say, document gen, for example, like, looking at a record in Salesforce, some records I could see, some records I can't, right? And that's where things that already exist, like OAuth, really come into play. And, I don't see it really being any different than the way things are done now, just done a lot faster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I can talk about it from my own perspective as a developer. I'm using AI every day in my development workflow. And it's about improving productivity and how do I get more output out of my, I like to joke that I'm a 10X engineer because I've got 10 fingers, right? But at the end of the day, right, how do I get more output out that is high quality? And so, I hear people talking about Windsurf and Cursor and all these different tools. And for me, the ones that have stuck the most in my own tech stack, and at least in terms of my development experience, are the ones that fit best with my developer experience and how I like to work. And so the ones that are embedded in, I use Visual Studio Code. So getting embedded into my IDE so I can stay in context as much as possible has made my life a lot easier.
One of the things I will say, Nicholas, is that I have seen a trend, maybe not growing, but a trend where things that we do normally, as you said, go out the window when it comes to AI. And it's not because of AI, it's because people, for some reason, just trust it more. So one of the things is, I was having a conversation with someone, and we're talking about like future of AI and development. And so one of the things that came up was like, cool, well, AI writes code. Code's generally writes, a bunch of it's wrong. You need to fix it. And it's like, cool. So what do? How do you make sure that it doesn't go live? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, we do code reviews today. Like, you have a junior engineer, they write code, people do code reviews. And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like, why is like all normal process go out the window when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And if you take Jared's analogy of a 10x engineer with 10 fingers, think of it as like a 15x engineer, because now you got an extra hand in there, and that's your AI.
Yeah.
Processes really shouldn't dramatically change. Like if you use Cursor, they have this thing called the background agent now. And even before, we were using GitHub Copilot. Now Cursor has this thing called BugBot, where it does that first pass for us. But guess what? Just like a human, sometimes it's wrong. Like it'll say, hey, your code has this small issue. And then, we all look at it as a team. We're like, I don't think that's wrong. I just don't think it has all the context, right? It doesn't know why we made this decision to do it this specific way. So yeah, I mean, just keep the human. The quicker AI becomes more human, this AGI thing that big companies like Meta are working on, and OpenAI, and pretty much all of them. I think that's you're training on human data, you're going to get human results. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, there used to be a saying for that, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
I mean, I try not to put out garbage, but I like champagne in, champagne out. Let's go with that.
I like that. It's we talk about drinking our own champagne instead of eating our own dog food. It's the same idea, right? So, well, cool. So, Ahmad, I want to bring it back to you, because I think one of the areas where we've seen a huge proliferation in AI usage is in threat actors like North Koreans impersonating U.S. employees and getting jobs. And we saw it was just over a year ago with KnowBe4 publishing how they actually hired a North Korean engineer. What are some things that you're seeing and from an identity and access management and privileged access management standpoint that MSPs really need to be aware of as they're dealing with these threat actors?
Yeah, our number one goal is to make sure the right person is logging into the right application and making it a lot easier for the employees. So we focus a lot on the user experience without losing on the security. So cybersecurity companies tend to intentionally, it feels sometimes, make things a lot more difficult for people to do stuff just to make it seem secure. We take the other approach. We want to make it as seamless as possible, but maintaining, if not making it more secure. So that's been kind of our motto, and we wanted to think about things differently. So like with that conversation about AI, any technology that's come into play, like from the introduction of Web 2.0 to mobile, automation, workflows, crypto, blockchain, etc., people, their initial reaction was to take this technology and then use it with the existing workflow, with the existing process, instead of, hey, maybe this can do it better or do it differently. And that's what we're trying to do with proximity-based authentication with AI, to try to make sure you're the right person. We don't want to replicate exactly what we have using a new technology, because that's wrong. What we want to do is think about how can we do things differently and make it a lot easier for the employee, make it a lot easier for the IT administrator, for the MSP to manage and stay on top of things. And when you do that, you are solving these problems by default, because then if someone's logging in from North Korea, you will know in your audit logs, you will get a notification. You'll see that someone's logging into multiple Google Workspace or Microsoft accounts using different domains, because you have access to that audit trail from an organization standpoint. And then when you are locking the entry to the device and you are authenticating you as the right person to log into that device, you solve all of these problems. And the way we do it is not just from the device itself, but also to your SSO, to your enterprise applications, and any other websites, and thus changing the mentality of, we're used to username and password, how can we automate that? Instead, hey, let's take a step back. We don't really need usernames and passwords. We don't need MFA. We can solve those, we can create a better solution that does deliver a better result with something different. So that's kind of how we're approaching it, which solves all of these problems.
Nicholas, yeah, response.
Can I ask you a question, Ahmad? I think we all seen this news about this Soham guy or Soham on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. Where's the world going with stuff like that? I feel like there's there's a lot of different perspectives on whether it's ethical or not. And take that aside, I'm curious, like if I was running an MSP today, how do I know that my techs who are logging by the hour don't have a second laptop next to me, also logging by the hour for another MSP, maybe a remote employee, for example. And I don't know if there might be an easy button for it, but I'm just curious, like, have you thought about that? And what are some of your perspectives on that? Because that to me is just so wild. Like I shamelessly had a similar experience that we caught very, very quickly and took care of. But, and then there's the ethics of like, if it's contract-based work, I think it's kind of fair games. You work your own time. But if it's like, I'm getting a salary, I'm being expected X hours a week and you're double dipping, that's where it gets a little funny.
Yeah, that is funny you mentioned that, because that is something we're trying to think about now. We've had a couple of conversations around this. I've been through this, by the way, as well. Hired someone and realized, anyways, we were able to solve it early as well. Just because we're techies, right? So we look at stuff and we see, oh, there's something wrong. And, we're looking at logs and stuff like that. But think about a company, HR team that's employing someone into the team. They aren't looking at this stuff. So the way we're solving it is, step number one is, if Everykey is the solution that companies are using to authenticate their employees, they have access to certain logs and audit trails that allows them to know that Nicholas just logged in from this IP and then suddenly he's in a different IP, then there's something wrong. It'll allow us to know that Nicholas logged in because we've got the browser extension, the desktop app, mobile app, they're all talking to each other, they're sync. You're able to see that I've been able to log in using multiple domains on different websites, different accounts, doing different things. So that is kind of another thing that we're doing. Now, if you want to cheat all of that and have two separate machines, that is the next step for us. We're trying to figure out how to do that in a seamless way without even interrupting the employee, because 99% of the times, it's just Mike doing his work. Like, I don't need to disturb his workflow because of the 1%. So, but at the same time, I need to be able to know that Mike's not using two different laptops. But we're figuring that out. That is next in our pipeline. First, we want to, focus on the easy part, solve the problem, and then we'll go into the edge cases like two laptops or something like that.
Yeah, there was actually a story very similar to that around me where it was a Maryland 40-year-old nail salon worker. Actually, in April, I think, just got sentenced to jail because he had acquired like 13 different remote IT jobs and had outsourced them all to people in China and etc. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that's going on and happening and needs to be tracked. And we need to find a way to catch that stuff early.
Yeah, we could do that today. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious if, and I highly doubt this is going to exist, but I wonder if there's almost like, it's nerding out for a second, like some sort of certificate. Like if you guys remember certificate-based login where you tap your card or plug in like a UB key or something. But then you're going to have, this this national registry of certificates, right? So like if the cert's used more than once, and maybe you could backtrace and say, hey, it's already used by another login. I don't know, but it's kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how this gets solved. Because again, it's hard when you have one person working at 13 different companies, possibly using 13 different machines. Like how do you track that piece down, right? It's not like
with for example, with Everykey, that's solved because you pair your mobile device or your token to your desktop device. And if they employed Mike, they're issuing this stuff to you. You have your own secure setup. That means you are the only one that is able to log in to the company infrastructure. tools, applications, etc. So if you have 13 other people that you've outsourced this to, they're unable to log in. So you've caught them. So it stops that from happening. So that's how we, or if let's say you have 2 laptops and you decide you like Everykey and you're like, hey, I want to use it for my other 10 jobs on this separate laptop, and this is a company issued laptop, and you pair your device to that second laptop, the company will know. And then, so we are able to solve things, but if they step out and not use Everykey at all, it becomes very difficult. That's why I called it an edge case. So, but it needs to be solved, right? And then if you can crack it from the beginning, from the source, then you can at least solve the whole problem. But even if you don't solve that problem, you're solving 90% of the problem, which today probably is great for a lot of companies that, have 0% solutions.
I don't know. There's that whole overemployed subreddit that talks about, to Mike's point, this is not one person farming it out to 13 other people. This is one person working 2 or 3 jobs and just organizing hours differently. And so it actually becomes, I think to Nicholas's point, when you're looking at the hourly logs, it's, all right, do I have to start looking at fingers on keyboard? And so somebody can't, because they're unlikely to be able to type effectively on 2 different keyboards, right? So they're realistically, they're only typing on one. But then if I'm reading a Google Doc or reading an article that is pertinent to my job, do I get some sort of screen time? And maybe this goes back to the facial recognition or the camera vision, computer vision that you were talking about earlier, Ahmad, where it's less about did I look away from my screen and more about which screen am I focused on, right? So it's less about the identity and access management and more about like focus. And again, where do we draw the line and how much time do we allow somebody to walk away from their computer before we stop tracking their time and towards, right? So
and you've got the extension can capture a lot of data. So if you are logging into multiple accounts, the extension can track that. If you're going to different websites, hey, here's a solution for AI. Understand if this is relevant to my job or not. And then, again, if you're reading a news article that's not relevant to anyone's job, then it's personal time, which is fine. So you have to identify. So it's a little bit tricky, but it can be done. And there are so many potential ways that this can go wrong and hallucinate and then cause a problem for the normal employee that's just, reading a news article, not doing anything wrong. So it's a little bit tricky and it has to be dealt with care.
Yeah, I'm also curious, and Nicholas, I'm going to kind of poke this at you just to get your perspective. Sometimes when I work with employees, they feel like what the security tools they're put in place, the IT tools they're put in place are too intrusive. And so coming up with some sort of acceptable use policy that outlines, hey, we're going to be monitoring your face nonstop while you're staring at your screen. I've even had employees that have basically said, hey, unless you're giving me a company issued device, I'm not installing email, MDM, et cetera, on my personal device. And so, since you're generating documents, how would you approach this? Any thoughts on that?
So I'm going to take away the document gen use case for a second. So we use this tool called Hubstaff, and Hubstaff is a time tracking tool because the majority of my team right now is contractors, and they're excellent. I just want to start by saying I have an awesome team. So if you guys are watching this, I want you to know that. But there's also an element of here's how many hours are logged. Here's the outcomes. And I don't focus on efforts. I focus on outcomes. So luckily, because I used to be a software engineer, I could look at a problem and have a pretty good idea of how long I think it should take. And I'm often wrong. Obviously things come up and, it's more of an art than a science. And we saw that with proactive communication. So in our own Discord, we have a policy where they do a stand up. And as they do the work, I make them do draft pull requests, which is kind of like a way for me to see work in progress. I'm not super anal about it. I don't sit there and, with a microscope, you did 2 lines of code today. Because look, that 2 lines could have taken 2 hours. I've had problems like that before. But what I will say, though, back to the tooling installations, Hubstaff is installed on their contractor environment if they don't like it, because it takes screenshots I think I have it set. Well, after we had that Soham situation that we caught quickly, I now make it more frequently. But if they don't if someone doesn't like it, they don't necessarily have to work for me. I'll just put it that way. And I'm not saying that to be facetious or to be rude or mean, but there's an element of trust. I try to be a lenient and nice person, and if somebody's blocked, and this goes back to culture, I think that if something is taking longer, right? And, an ignorant person might look at that and be like, oh, they're working 2 jobs, or, oh, they're milking the hours, right? That to me is a fool's game, because what you should really be asking is, hey, where are you at? Where are you blocked? Want me to jump on, do a paired programming session? And that's going to tell more of the story than micromanaging to the point where it's ineffective. Because look, everyone learns at different rates. Everyone has different specialties. So, all in all, I mean, I think you kind of just, it's as an employee, you kind of have to figure out, is this an environment I want to work in? And also the type of role you have. Because like when I was a solutions engineer, when I was the technical counterpart in a sale, we were paid on outcomes. Didn't matter if I worked 5 hours, if I worked 150 hours, if that's even possible in a week. But, it's our quotas told the story. It's really what it came down to. So it's, I don't know if in IT, if there's an equivalent. I mean, maybe you could set KPIs, like here's how many tickets you closed, or here's how many servers you stood up, or here's how many, incidents resolved. That I think has to be kind of the North Star here. I think you have to have like solid KPIs and a culture where people are comfortable saying, hey, like, even though I said it would be done Friday, it's not going to be done Friday because I ran into a few things that neither of us accounted for. How can we resolve it together? And if you do that proactively, like not after the deadline, you do this ahead of time, which should seem like common sense, like there's nothing wrong with it, right? So.
Yeah, there's an old joke. Guy goes into, gets called in to fix an old steam engine, and he walks around it, spends 10 minutes kind of listening, and then taps it in one spot, and all of a sudden the steam engine starts working again. He sends a bill for $10,000, and the guy says, "It took you 10 minutes. How could you charge me $10,000?" And the guy says, "Well, I charged you $10 for tapping the thing, and $9,990 for knowing exactly where to hit it." it's like there's a value of expertise that, to your point, Nicholas, is really sort of a critical component in terms of building the value add, right? Because again, it's the 2 lines of code might take you 2 hours to write, but it's knowing which 2 lines of code and where to write those lines and doing the investigation, making sure that you're not playing code golf, right? Where you're just trying to do the fewest lines as possible, but that they are actually readable, legible lines. Because at the end of the day, if I can't read it and maintain it tomorrow, it doesn't matter how much time I've spent writing the code, right? I'm going to write it once and I'm going to read it many times, right? So how do I build for that resilience in that future state?
100%. How do you make it easy for the next guy? I mean, because, also the last thing on this for me, I'm very big on time. If you ever heard me on different podcasts or just some of my philosophies, I'm very, very big on time, because it's the only resource in this universe or multiverse, if we're going on Rick and Morty here from your picture, that you can't manufacture, you can't make more, you can't buy it, you rent it every day, and the rent is due, as cliche as that is. And, I have team members like that, where if I put them on, we call it the TurboDocx engine, which part of it's like our open source. One of my team members is so fast. It's like unhuman. Like if we have a bug, like he immediately knows where to go, taps the hammer in the right spot. And then I have other team members that I'll use myself. If I were to take that same problem, it would take me a week, and there's value to expertise, but you also want to let your team kind of learn and grow and, kind of cross train them well around them, because going back to time, they're not going to be here forever. And I don't mean that in like a morbid way, but just if you look at the average stats of someone working in a job, most of the time they're not besides now, which is kind of like the tech snapping, which might be like another topic altogether for like layoffs and stuff. Historically, the average tenure of someone in the software, even IT space, I'd go as far as saying that was like 2 to 3 years, give or take, sometimes even less. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually bring this back a little bit to AI, because a lot of the things we're seeing with AI, a lot of things we're seeing with AI today are things like death of the tier 1 tech and death of the entry-level engineer and all this stuff. And one of the things that Jared and I always talk about is, that's awesome, I guess, but without a level 1 tech or a level 1 entry engineer, you don't get the level 2 tech or the level 3 tech. And so how do you how is this going to work out? How do we grow people and have them leverage AI to accelerate, but still not kill off those positions, so we don't run out of tier 2, tier 3 techs in 10, 20 years, right? Which is another thing that's going to be interesting as this progresses.
Yep.
I have opinions on this, but I don't want to hog the conversation. I have very strong opinions on this.
Well, Ahmad, what do you have any opinions on this, Ahmad, that you'd like to share? And then maybe we'll give Nicholas some time to go into
Yeah. So I think this comes down to what I mentioned earlier. People do not need to think about their existing workflows and then how can AI just come in and do that workflow. Instead, maybe I need to change. Maybe the whole concept of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 needs to change, and then use AI and build a new system that does things better. So, and then those people that were used as tier 1 agents will have a role in this new system doing something else with the support of Gen AI if implemented across this new system. So I think that is kind of my mentality, and I guess you guys follow the same rule of thumb, is let's just not take it and execute it as is. Let's think of how it can make things, how can we change the system and do things differently? Because AI is not here to take people's jobs. It's here to make the outcome better if done properly with the help of humans, because they are still going to be around, but maybe doing something different. Like when, I forgot what the exact story was, but like anytime when a new innovative technology comes out, everyone rushes and starts, hey, it's going to take humans' jobs. And then what ends up really happening is these people that used to work those jobs either maintain or move on to different roles because the system's eventually changed. So that's my thought.
Yeah. Well, it's the old.
Always leave them wanting more.
Yeah. That was teased. I want to know more.
Nicholas, you want to give us your spicy take on this?
Oh, very spicy. So I call this Schrodinger's AI because it simultaneously makes things quicker, kills jobs, but also creates it, and then isn't actually wanted in some cases. A few examples. So if you're an MSP, you're trying to grow your business and you're calling a bunch of people. If you cold call, believe it or not, people still do it, and it works sometimes. And someone picks up the phone, you're a human, you almost like sigh of relief, like, thank you, because I can't tell you how often I get robo-dialers. Hey, is your car warranty expiring? Click, and that's an example. Like right now, I would call it like dumb AIs. It's literally just voice to text, but now there's smart AI, and I've seen it. We actually, there was a company we invested in, I think pivoted, but was trying something like that. And long story short, like you're now able to market at scale to where it becomes noise and not signal, which is why I believe, like my firm belief of the direction the world is going, I think tier 1 is shrinking. I think the bar is a lot higher now. I think if you're going to go hire someone out of college or out of a technical program or a certificate program, they're going to probably have to have the same knowledge and performance as a tier 2, in my opinion, because it doesn't make sense for menial tasks. If someone could just go on ChatGPT and say, how do I debug a group policy option, right? It's not like you have to sit there and Google a million times and read the settings and stuff like that. But, I think what the last frontier of tech is relationships and empathy. I cannot emphasize that enough because that's going to be the last thing that's going to come to generative AI. Generative AI is very good at champagne in, champagne out, going back to the last reference. If you teach it how to do things the right way, you'll get relatively good results. I've seen a lot of like RMM tooling. Not going to name any vendors, but there's like a lot of cool stuff where it's like auto approval based off rules and roles, and and a lot of it's marketing too. Like I'm sure some of it's not quite where they claim it is, or it could be a little better. But I think if I was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting I was talking at, and they were asking about that, like, hey, we're trying to get people hired out of these technical programs and AIs, blah, 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 and they're being all, kind of morbid here. And I'm like, well, I want to put it that way, but I definitely think the one who actually took the time to work while they were going through this program, the one who interned at the help desk at the community college, for example, the one who knows how to deal with a screaming customer is going to do much better than the person who knows how to troubleshoot an agent that's not installing right. Because that, I'm not saying it's worthless. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but we need less of those, and we need more. You're doing less with more, and I think the only boundary at this point is empathy.
It's actually a really interesting point, because when we would hire for our help desk positions back in the day when I was running IT teams, we always felt that we could teach the technical skills. You can't teach the person skills, the people skills. And so we would much rather hire someone that used to be like a server or a waiter that has dealt with people with customer service than someone who knows how to tweak the widget. We can teach them how to tweak the widget. You can't teach someone how to interact with someone.
Yeah,
it's you can, but it's harder. It takes more time.
And if you look at the direction a lot of software is going, including ours, we worked really hard to get our generative AI flows going, and we're demoing to people. People like it. We're getting subscribers, whatever. But on the flip side, this, and Satya Nadella actually said this: the biggest shock to user experience, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's going to make it to the MSP space pretty soon, are chat UIs. Like, think about it. If somebody goes in to a help desk agent, like they're going to put a ticket in and says, hey, I need access to this application, or hey, I'm having issues with networking, or hey, all the millions of things you might get, it might get to the point where to provision an application, for example, is the LLM figures out exactly what needs to happen, this and that. And if a human is involved, and I use the word if, they literally just hit approve, deny. Now, the question is, do you need an IT tier 1 tech for that? Do you need someone in HR or legal to do that? Do you need, it changes the paradigm completely of a company structure. And for these really small sort of MSPs, you now have the ability to perform at the enterprise level without that price tag attached. That's where I see this going. And that's where I think the bar is going to raise, because it's how you work with people. You're spot on.
Yeah. So interestingly, on that chat analogy, I saw something on Reddit the other day of an MSP complaining about a vendor using chat in their support process, where they were able to resolve the issue using the AI chatbot, and then went on to Reddit to complain about the AI chatbot and saying, my clients would hate this. And I was thinking that, like, the cognitive dissonance there is sort of entertaining.
It is entertaining. And I would even go a step further and say, who's your customer, right? Like, if you're going to a law firm, it's been around for 30 years and it's, Gen X and boomers, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very different mindset than targeting like a Gen Z population, in a smaller, newer company. It's not to segment it by age, because I think that's the wrong way of doing it. I think it's to segment it by technological experience. I mean, if you hire a lot of these Gen Z guys, they grew up using Google. Like, that is their first spot. Google and Wikipedia. When I was a kid, Wikipedia wasn't a valid source, and we had to use the Dewey Decimal System, if anyone remembers that, to go and look up information in encyclopedia. But that was like on its way out when I was a kid. So I agree.
Yeah. Well, cool. So in the interest of time here, I'm going to jump over to some audience questions. So we'll sort of stay on this. Nicholas, you mentioned the RMM. We talked about chatbots. My vendor says that their product uses AI. Should I be excited or concerned? Wrong answers only. Ahmad, you want to start?
My vendor's using AI. I should not be concerned, but I should understand how they're using it. And I need to understand how they're using it, because I, as an MSP, am selling this product and I'm managing this product and I'm taking care of this product. I need to be able to, I don't want to be a box mover. I want to be able to know how things go. So don't be concerned, be educated.
All right, Nicholas, what's your take?
You should absolutely be concerned. Your team members and employees are going to work 10 times faster. What are you going to do with all this extra time? Are you going to just tell them to take off and go to the beach? You're going to have them shovel snow in front of your customers? This is like the worst thing that's ever happened.
Mike, what's your take?
We're going to have so much more room for activities. I think it's a combination of both, right? You should be concerned as far as not understanding what they're doing, how the data is being used, especially if you're putting any sort of customer data in there. There's implications from a privacy perspective, from a compliance perspective. But again, it's not so much a concern as Ahmed said. It's more of a, you need to understand what they're using AI for, what your data is being used for. Is your data being used to train the model? Because sometimes that's not okay either. And so gaining an understanding, doing the security review, looking at security white papers, etc., makes sense, but you don't need to run for the hills quite yet.
Yeah. Be concerned after, but not before.
Yeah.
Do the due
To Mike's
diligence.
point, so if you're dealing with a larger contract, ask for something called a data processing addendum, a DPA. If they like quiver and run for the hills, it's probably not a good sign. And then the next thing is check the TOS, like terms of service, for how they use your data with AI. You're spot on there. And like I was looking at another vendor for a tool we were going to use. I'll use Cursor as an example. So we pay extra for Cursor not to train on our data. So sometimes depending on the tier, they'll offer that. But yeah, know where your data is going. Solid.
Yeah, I mean, so having been to enough security conferences and seeing enough security vendors or security researchers pull data out of things, even out of LLMs that should not have been trained on, despite any data processing agreements and things like that, I do think the only way you can, at least today, guarantee that your data is not being added into the LLM and being used by other vendors potentially or other customers potentially in the future is to have a completely isolated instance of that. So that's maybe a topic for another day. Maybe I need to take my tinfoil hat off here.
No, but that is something that's been coming up a lot, by the way. So it is definitely worth a topic, but we've been seeing that a lot.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm also not sold in the fact that when they tell you that the model is not being trained on your data, they have any clue what they're talking about. So I'll add to your tinfoil hat, add a couple of layers of tinfoil to it.
Well, last thing on my end, like speaking from experience, so we have an enterprise agreement with one of our AI vendors, and there's a DPA attached to it. Like I went out of my way to make sure we had one. So from our standpoint, from us to the AI vendor, according to them, they're not training on what we send over. And then from us to the customer, we don't train. Like I'll just say that flat out. Yeah. But I know other vendors who are, like, they're taking that data and then they fine tune the models, and then to your point, that could be catastrophic. So
yeah, but I guess that's kind of my point, right? There's the intentional usage of training, then there's the unintentional, where again, because all the data when it ends up in the LLM is vectorized, there's no way of like concretely proving or disproving that it exists.
Yeah, so you can't concretely prove or disprove that it exists in the training model or not. Cool. There's another question here. Let's see here. How do you draw the line between automation and accountability? So if your AI is doing something, who's accountable for it?
If I have a Tesla Cybertruck and it runs someone over and it was in full self-driving, who gets sued?
Yeah. No, it's interesting because one of the things that we do from a policy perspective is within our acceptable use policy, we actually have an AI clause. And part of that clause is you're responsible for whatever, right? It's framed more professionally, but you're responsible for whatever nonsense AI spits out. So if you're the one that's pushing the code, you're the one that's doing whatever, you're responsible for that work product. But if you use AI, you're the one that needs to make sure that it's actually a legitimate work product. And there was the instance of the New York lawyers that got destroyed because they used AI to pull a brief, and AI hallucinated and pulled case information that didn't exist. There's actually another case like that. I don't know if it was AI based, but again, in Maryland, very similar, where someone just put a brief in front of a judge and they quoted legislation that never happened. In court cases never happened. Again, I don't know if they used AI or they just decided to make it up. I'm guessing they used AI because it seems very weird for them to just make something up like that themselves. But again, the person who's putting the work forward is the one that should be responsible and accountable.
And the problem with that is, even if you say that, this will still happen. And
100%.
And there should be a way to put guardrails of some sort to prevent this from happening. Whether, I don't know, like if someone hallucinates, like someone's writing the thing, not using AI, and they make up a legislation, how do you solve that problem? By having someone review
but they're
their
accountable.
work.
They're responsible for their work product.
Correct. So this is a similar situation. So then it is so from a legal perspective or from an accountability perspective, I agree with you. But if I think about it from a different perspective, where is there a way, can we solve this problem and change the system in a way, some way or another? That is of course a future thing to be taken care of. It is a conversation worth having, because we're doing things differently, right? So it's back to that concept. So we don't have to do things the same way they're done now. Let's think about how can we do things differently and solve that problem.
So to your point, on our own web, we have this thing called TurboDocx Labs, which is kind of just like a place where we do these little experimental projects. And we actually have a citation checker. We did that on purpose. So what it does is it looks at the common citation formats for different legal standards across the United States, and it runs it through. It's not even programmatic; like it's all regex, like old school programmatic matching. And then from there, it checks the citation. Like you click in, it opens a new tab, and it runs it through one of those legal search engines. And I'm not going to name a few because there's quite a bit. We have like 3 or 4. It goes back to that manual QA, right? Human has to kind of look through it. And even like ChatGPT now, I believe, has citations. Like it should provide citations that you could click. And I do think if you are the type who just copy paste, like shame on you, just kidding. Instead of shame on you, just click that citation and check it for your own 2 eyes. But generally speaking, I think it's gotten a lot better. I don't think it's like it was a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I will say, I did get a citation from ChatGPT once, and I clicked the citation. It took me to a ChatGPT generated article from somewhere that was also wrong. It's like, cool, awesome. But we've had that for years, right? Where someone writes some nonsense online and then someone finds it and quotes it. That's why you couldn't use Wikipedia as a reputable source when you were growing up, Nicholas.
Yeah, they ruined it for us, man. I can't even imagine, like, this is, what is it, Gen Alpha now, or the kids are being born like in the last 3 years. They were first going to kindergarten shortly. Like their experiences would be so different. I can't even imagine. Like I can't even think of advice to give someone that age. Like besides empathy, focus on a people-facing role. Like it's wild. Like
yeah. Well, and on that note, it's actually probably a good time for us to close out, just in the interest of time here. But thank you for joining us today on Get NIST-y. If you learned something new or just enjoyed watching us debate the robots, don't forget to subscribe and follow along. We'll be back soon with more no fluff, no FUD conversations to help you make security and compliance a real advantage.
Get NIST-y. Yeah, we're